Linda Nielsen. My name is Nicole Federo, and I am the events coordinator for the EAA board. As many of you know, we had to make a very difficult decision to postpone the summer conference, which for many of you is your highlight of your summer. And so it put us in this interesting position to come up with a series of talks that we could present to you all virtually, and that what grew from that is actually turning into something that's really quite interesting, and we're really excited about it. So obviously we've had, our first one was last Thursday, and then Samantha has graciously agreed to present tonight. In July, we have a presentation from Gina Applegate, who will be presenting a little bit on the ukulele, which was a plan for this summer. But she's going to give us kind of an overview and prepare us for the next time we can be together and teach you a little bit about what kind of ukulele to buy and all that good stuff. And then Christina Carroll will be presenting the timeline of education to tell us, to give us a little perspective before we start this strange new school year. And then at the end of July, we're going to have more of a panel discussion. Regina has been posting some questions every Monday, and so we're going to have a time for us to have more of a live discussion at the end of July. And then, of course, we have the culturally responsible Montessori environment webinar that the first live sessions are this week. And if you have not signed up for it, Rachel, can they even sign up for it anymore? Nope. So you missed out.
Sorry. We're
but you know, we might offer that again in the future. Yeah. So keep in contact with us. Sign up to be one of our members. We are a grassroots organization. We're member funded, member organized. So if you ever have any ideas that you would like to present to us, you can email any of us. You can join EAA Talk. And we're here for you guys to support you during this uncertain time and to just open discussions. So we've all probably been to way too many virtual meetings this year, but just to make sure, you do not have to have your camera on, but do make sure that your mic is muted. And it looks like we have about 34 people here today. So Samantha will have some time for questions, but I think for this particular presentation, because we do have so many people, that we're going to ask that you just put it in the chat. The chat function is just up in the corner. So you can click on it and then type in your question. I know she has a spot in the middle where she's going to stop and talk as well. So if you have any questions during the entire presentation, go ahead and put them in the box. And Rochelle and I will field them to Samantha as they pop up. All right, I think that's all my business and my announcements. So tonight we're super excited to have Samantha Vijay here to talk about the kingdoms. And Samantha, for those of you who don't know, has basically been a Montessorian since she was in utero. But she holds an AMI diploma in primary, elementary, and adolescent levels. She is an experienced student, teacher, and is now the head of Arbor School, Montessori School in Decatur, Georgia. In 2017, Samantha was our EAA on-site coordinator for the summer conference in Greenville, South Carolina, her home state and her hometown. And so I could tell you lots more things about Samantha, but I'm going to let Samantha tell you all about herself and why she is so qualified and excited to do this presentation tonight. So Samantha, you may begin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm really excited to be here virtually with all of you. Like Nicole said, I am elementary trained, and you know, I just have a lot of my own experiences that I would like to share with you. My goal for this evening is to really talk you through the materials that are listed in the EAA archives, and hopefully will help unlock this material for you and help get it in your classrooms. So before I go into all of the material, I just wanted to expand a little bit on how I got to this space in my journey. And I will go through a little bit of the history of the materials themselves. So obviously I'm elementary trained, and I know we have a few trainees on the call this evening. And so I'm sure all of you remember being so inspired, but also maybe at the same time a little overwhelmed at times. And, you know, making the materials was not really feasible while you were on the course. And going back and trying to decipher, discover, put it all together, it was a little overwhelming. And even just going through the archives themselves can be a little overwhelming. I took my training in 2000. I finished my training in 2010. I did a 3 summer at WMI, and I was still teaching in primary at the time. So I moved up with a group of about 8 of my primary students into a lower elementary classroom, and I worked with them until 2013 when I came to Arbor. So that very first school year that I was here at Arbor, it was my good fortune that we had a scheduled AMI consultation. Phyllis Potash-Lewis, who is really the AMI guru on all of the work that I'm presenting today, she was our consultant. And in my teacher paperwork, I confessed that I had not made the material. And we did have one in our level that we could access, but I was really struggling with my own understanding of it. So any of you who know Phyllis or have worked with Phyllis know that she is a gracious teacher and offered her support to me and really making the material and unlocking the material. And so I had time to work with her prior to her presentation to the elementary alumni in Sausalito in 2015, the summer of 2015. So I'm just going to go through some of this. So let's see. As I go through, I would like to look through. I'm having a little bit of a moment here because my slide is not progressing. So here we go. So I want to say thank you to Phyllis Potash-Lewis specifically. A lot of the work that she has done to support not only myself, but all of the members of EAA. And if you haven't had a chance to go through the archives, I will walk you through that today. So before we can really get into the work that we have ahead of us, I think it's important for us to take a moment and really understand where this came from. So, you know, many people may or may not know that a lot of the elementary materials or the ideas for the elementary work came from when Maria Montessori and Mario Montessori were in India, and just being in that space allowed them the opportunity to look at things in a different way, in a different manner. So during that time, they came up with the idea for classification as a way for students to organize material, organize great concepts into manageable categories. So the incomplete material was presented in the 1957-1958 elementary training course in London. And following that course, it was presented again at an international study conference. And during that time, the next name that we owe some gratitude to, Mrs. Eleanor Honegger, she was inspired from that presentation and then traced the material. So in 1961, when the Bergamo course began, Mario Montessori gave pedagogical advice on the further development of the animal classification material that was possibly undertaken by Mrs. Honegger. So on that course, they really kind of have a lot of information that was presented at that time and may still be presented in Bergamo. So in 1965, Miss Famida Malik, who had been working in Bergamo, moved to Holland to work with Mario Montessori and further develop both the animal and plant classification under Mario's guidance. And so both of the classification material for plants and animals were reviewed, vetted, and refined by Mario Montessori and Famida Malik for presentation on the inaugural AMI elementary course given at the Washington Montessori Institute and directed by Margaret Stevenson. And so Famida Malik gave all of those biology presentations. So I have a picture of the 1976 elementary training course that was at WMI, and I'm going to just go through a couple key people that you might be interested in knowing. The first one, Margaret Stevenson. The second one, Mario Montessori. The next one, Famida Malik, who I consider to be an unsung hero of this work. The next one, Phyllis Potash-Lewis. And it's worth putting on here because she was my trainer, Kay Baker. So, now I would like to go through just some information. So before we get into this, I would like to just share with you a book that I had when I was in when I was teaching elementary. If you don't already have this book, I think it's a great resource for students to be able to really understand how to break things into a classification system. And it has wonderful language and pictures. I do have some excerpts of this included in my presentation today, so you'll be able to see how you might use it or how students might be able to get into it. So, when you are ready to make your classification materials, I cannot stress enough that you need to get yourself ready. This is not a small undertaking. It's a big job. So things that you will need to get situated: colored paper. I will go more into detail with that in just a moment. You need a paper cutter. So I would suggest, for those smaller cuts, a quality paper cutter. You can get them at Michael's or Joann's or, any of those places. And they usually have coupons. So there's that. A quality glue stick. And when you have a quality glue stick and when you don't. So make sure that you have several of them because you will need at least, I would say 2, maybe more. Quality scissors. So scissors that are just for use on paper. And so not scissors that you're using on any and everything, but quality scissors. It makes all the difference when you are doing all of this cutting. A large workspace. So especially when you get to the gluing component, you're going to want to have space to be able to spread out. And eventually you will need access to a laminator. So we have Kingdom Vegetalia and Kingdom Animalia. So it is important for you to know that there are a couple of things that I'm going to say. In my own personal training, it was originally Kingdom Plante, and since working with Phyllis, I have altered that to be representative of Kingdom Vegetalia. I think it's important for you to know that the etymology that we use with all of this material really it goes into the actual description of the classification system. And so you're going to see a lot of Greek and a lot of Latin that come through, and you have the ability. So the root for vegetalia is to grow, so vegetare. And with plante, it just means like stick or shrub, and it's not really the same inspiration. And the other thing that is important to know is all of the things that it's not a completely exhaustive system that we are presenting. What we present is items that were carefully chosen because the children could see or observe the characteristics with their naked eye or with a very simple microscope. So there was even thought to this level of detail, which I found very fascinating. And anything else? I'm going to go through Kingdom Vegetalia first. And then I have gone into more detail with Kingdom Vegetalia just because I think that it will help you get into the understanding of how the classification system works. And we'll spend a little bit more time there, and then we'll go through Kingdom Animalia. So first things first, when you go into the archives, it is listed as KV for EAA. And so unlocking the archives, when you open that zip drive, you are going to see a whole lot of files, and you might really not know where to start. So the first thing that I would encourage you to look at is the Kingdom Vegetalia measurements. So this is how it pulled up on my screen, so I just took a screenshot of it. But when you get there, that would be a good starting spot for you to go to. So as you were preparing for that, inside that document, you are going to see a whole breakdown of the classification scheme. And Phyllis really has told you everything that you need to know. So she has broken down how many sheets for kingdom, division, the branches, the classes, the subclasses, and the families. And so there's a note down here at the bottom about, I say branches again, 4 to 5 sheets of brown paper, but if you were mapping that classification, there are separate notes about making the branches and how it divides out, and that will come later. And that, or I could say that's a story for another day. So, but you are going to want to go from darkest to lightest as you go through. So your kingdom is going to want to be the darkest shade of green, and you're going to want to just edge your way back as you go. So I have pulled a couple places. Let's see if this is going to work. Hopefully it will. It did in our practice. So binders might be an art supply store that you go to. What I find really difficult about this is that it doesn't show the exact colors. It gives a description in the name, but it is important for you to note that, you know, it is an expensive undertaking. You are going to be looking at somewhere, depending on how many sheets you buy, of about $80 to $100 just for your paper. And that's assuming that you use the acid-free paper. You're going to want it big enough, but that's something to consider. Dick Blick, which is another art store. I did also pull this, and you will get all of this information, but just so you can see, I find this one to be a little bit more helpful because they sell it in bulk and they'll ship it to you. So you don't have to kind of go through the store and get banged up leftover copies, but you know, whatever you have access to, it is what it is. But what's nice here is that they show you some of the shades that you might be working with, but again, it's not in person. And you know, even just trying to figure out Kingdom Animalia, like I ended up going into the oranges in order to get all of the colors that I needed. But you know, you can do it the best that you can. So the other thing that I want to say is the numbers of papers that Phyllis has recommended is based off of the amount of paper she needed when she created her classification scheme. So she has included in the archives a lot more pictures than what you actually need. And so you will either buy more paper or be a little bit more selective with the number of pictures that you include in your material. Okay, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty a little bit. So I'm going to go to the details of making the material. So you can see that when I made my material with Phyllis, I mean, it's a lot of cutting. I cut out each and every one of these by hand, but you can see how I had one sheet of my paper. This looks like it was for the smallest level or down to the family perhaps. And so I have my folders, I have my information text cards, I have my circles. And so I'm trying to get as much on a paper as possible because again, these papers are expensive. So that's something that you might want to think about or consider as you're doing this. And if you have one of those handy tools that can make those circles for you, or a compass, you're going to be making a lot of circles and you're going to want them to be able to nest within themselves. So just other key things. Maybe I'll add that to my materials. And so then know that when you get to that lamination process, if I were going to make my materials again, I would start assembling the text cards and the circles from Kingdom all the way down to family, because I think it makes the most sense to understand the material as you go. But I would not start making my folders that way. I would start making my folders at family and then work my way up, because as you laminate your cards and your circles, it adds dimension to it. And so then you can actually build it to what you have instead of what you think you might have. Okay. All right, now we're into the next slide. I think it's coming. All right, so understanding the layout within each container. So again, thinking of those nesting dolls. So when you open your Kingdom Vegetalia, before you go to the two branches that are underneath it, Phanerogamy and Cryptogamy, you're just looking at Vegetalia. On the very top, you are going to have your classification circle. And so that classification circle will be the first thing that greets you when you open this material. And I will say the material that I have is the not up-to-date version. You will know by the mushroom that I have, the mushroom that's on here. I believe that the version that is on the EAA archives is the more up-to-date version that does not have that. But it was just an interesting tidbit that I would share. The next thing, which is not clearly pictured here, is some of the boxes will have a heading card. And so the heading card is the one that actually describes the actual box that you're looking at. So Kingdom Vegetalia is the first card that is under. And so if there are more text cards, and this one does not happen to have more text cards, then that's what would follow. And then you have your picture cards that offer a variety of what plant life might fall into that particular category. And then the very last card that would be on display is what I call the subdivision card. So what are the ways that you can break, and I think I called them branches before, but I'm sorry, they were divisions. So division Phanerogamy and division Cryptogamy. And so this all sits on top of those next two boxes. So you've got a division Phanerogamy and a division Cryptogamy. So normally when I'm presenting this to students, once we have gone through Kingdom Vegetalia, everything else is out of the box. I'm just presenting this empty box with, you know, just these cards and circles that I have here. And then I say, well, which way should we go? What do you want to do next? And so they will make a decision, having not known really what's what, and then we'll go that way. So this is really just saying what I just said. Sorry about that. But what I think will be helpful to each and every one of you is in the yellow boxes down below, I have tried to highlight really clearly what are the files from the archives that you will need to actually make these materials. So when you are going to make the Kingdom Vegetalia circle and heading card and text cards and photo cards. It doesn't have text cards, but all of those things are within these 3 files in the archives. So hopefully that will be really clear for you. So the next slide will be, perhaps we chose to go down to division cryptogamy. So as you can see, hopefully, division cryptogamy is not very, it's not very big, because we go through this division, but we don't further categorize this material. So the inspiration is there because on the subdivision card, we list out the ways that it can be subdivided, but we don't exhaust the work for them. That becomes the work of the children. And so again, you've got your heading card, your text cards, your photo cards, and your subdivision cards. So when we go through that with the children, where they're like, okay, well now I guess we can go to the other one. So we have division phanerogamy. Can I just, is it helpful for me to show you what this looks like, or is it helpful for me to just talk through it? Like, would you like to see how thick phanerogamy is, or is it not necessary?
You can show us how thick it is. Everyone likes to see things.
Okay. Hold on one second. It's a little bit bigger. So required me to stand up. So this is division phanerogamy. So you can tell, wait, there's my camera. You can tell already compared to cryptogamy, it is significantly larger. I did not go through the etymology of cryptogamy. Crypto means secret, and gamy means marriage. And so the way that plants in a cryptogamy reproduce is really unknown. People had no idea. Think of all of your ferns and how do those things reproduce? So when we get to phanerogamy, the term is visible marriage. You have your circle, you have your heading card. So this one says division phanerogamy at the very top. And then you have a bevy of text cards that go through all of the different things that apply to phanerogamy plants, and some picture cards, and then finally your subdivision card. So again, as you get here, you can offer the students an opportunity to decide which way do they want to go with this material. And so when you're making the material, you have the ability to go through these files that are listed in the yellow box. So hopefully that will make it significantly more accessible to you. So, all right, so we had gymnospermae and angiospermae. So I'm going to start with gymnospermae. Again, you can see here, this is not one that we exhaust fully. It's here. So these gymnospermae, so spermae meaning seed, and gymno meaning naked seed. And so same setup, you've got your circle, your heading card, your text cards, your photo cards, and your subdivision cards. So hopefully you're getting the hang of it already. So angiospermae is, again, significantly wider. And within that phanerogamy box, you had gymnospermae and angiospermae, and all of this was nested in the kingdom box. So let me go to my next slide. So same thing, angiospermae. So these are covered seeds. So you've got your circle, you've got your heading card, you have your text cards, you have photos, and then your subdivision card. And so these can either go into monocotyledonate or dicotyledonate. And so again, you can offer students that opportunity. So from here, both of these boxes are about the same width. They're, you know, we offer the same. So dicotyledon, we have all of that same setup. So archiclamidae and metaclamidae. So archiclamidae is old dress, so the archaic old dress, and metaclamidae is new dress. So for dicotyledons, they are a newer kind of plant or flower that has evolved to really, you know, be able to contain that pollen. So, and you have all of the information about what that might look like. So all of that, those two boxes are contained within this box of dicotyledons. So when I open it up, I have all of my circle, my cards that are here, and then two more boxes. So hopefully you're getting that nesting box feeling. And then for monocotyledons, so I found this extremely interesting. So at this point, the monocotyledons can be subdivided into either group 1 or group 2. This one was a little hard for me when I was just kind of learning about it, because everything else, as you can kind of see, has beautiful etymology that really drives the classification. And the scientists really were just kind of, I guess they were just done. They were like, group 1, group 2. So you're going to really need to encourage the children to kind of figure out their own way that they can keep up with what's what. For me, I just figured 1, you know, straight and narrow. It just reminded me that those are the grasses. Group 1, those are the grasses. Group 2, they start to develop those floral envelopes. So, then next, so looking at this, I tried to be, you know, I switched the format here because I wanted you to be able to see all of this. So you have archiclamidae, metaclamidae, group 1 and group 2, and all of those are here. So there are many families that fall within these subclasses. We are really just giving the students just a glimpse into what that is. So they're just a sample. Like, I just want to make sure that you understand that this is not a fully exhausted list. We are just giving them the keys to understanding and the keys to knowledge. So once they are able to kind of classify the material, this is up to them to really go through. And then maybe they can find other plants that fall within any of these subclasses. So let's see. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the folders. So the format of the folders is really, with the exception of the Kingdom folder, because as you saw in that first slide as we were going through, the Kingdom folder looks very plain, because you don't want to have one plant that you feel like represents all of the plants together. So as you get down into these different folders and boxes, then you can have a characteristic, a plant that has all of the characteristics that becomes your representative. And so that representative plant has the characteristics that are defined by that particular grouping of plants. So on the outside, you can see that you have the name clearly written in one photo. And then on the inside, this is really the information that is on your subdivision card to some extent. And so again, all of this information is here under the KV folder information. And so you're also going to put the inside of your circle as well, so that way the students are reminded all of the things that go in the box are like this. So I think, let me see. Yeah, before we go to Animalia, I wanted to check to see if there were specific questions about Vegetalia. So I don't know, I guess I can open up the chat, or if Rochelle or Nicole, if you guys see anything that needs to be addressed before I just dive in to the next section.
So this is a great
Did
time.
anybody have any questions? Yeah, so did anyone have any questions about what Samantha has talked about so far?
So I see that someone had asked me to show the previous slide again. I'm sorry, I will share the slides. Yeah, I will share the slides so you will have access to it. So hopefully that, I'm sorry, I didn't see that before.
I don't see anything at the moment, Samantha, so you can keep going.
Keep on keeping on. Okay. So Kingdom Animalia. So this is a much larger classification scheme, and I definitely introduce this after I do Kingdom Animalia. I'm sorry, I'm just going to grab it just in case I need it. And so to me, when we look at all of the work that students have done prior to doing the classification scheme, we just offer a lot more botany experiments than we just don't offer as much in terms of zoology, where it's the dissection, where it's the you know, putting their hands on it or in it. And so to me, that's why we would present Vegetalia first and then move into Animalia. So you want the students to have an understanding of the basis of a classification system. So I'm going to go and show, this next slide really shows you the inside of that book that I was recommending, just so you have an understanding of how big Animalia is. So if you look in this bottom left-hand corner, you see like a whole lot of highlighter yellow and a little bit of green. So in this book, they talk about that tree of life and how many species fall into this category. So if you look at how many invertebrates there are on the entire tree of life, all living things, I mean, the invertebrates really dominate it. It is, I mean, as you can see. Now, if you look to the right, we have the same tree, or what's supposed to be the same tree. And there's like this tiny little bit of highlighter yellow that you can probably barely see on your screen. And that is what represents the vertebrates. And so again, part of our work is to really establish our humility as, you know, who we are and our species, and how we are just one part of the entire cosmic, you know, universe. That I just think that really helps students to have an understanding. And the name of the book is, I believe it's called The Tree of Life. And I'll put it, maybe someone can put it in the chat if they have a comment or took that note. I can't remember the authors off the top of my head.
I'll put it in there.
Okay, thank you. So before we go here, I wanted to go back to, you know, our gratitude, because a lot of this work was developed, and, you know, as we look at this, so in 1991, on that same timeline, Marcia Pelocci and Phyllis Potash-Lewis really developed the phylum Arthropoda. Phyllis had to correct me. I was saying arthropoda, and she said biologists. say arthropod. So I will share that with you because I'm not a biologist by nature. I'm just a Montessori teacher. So if that's helpful to you, or you could say arthropod, I won't tell. But that really came about from 1991. So this next slide really shows you what the layout is. So again, we're just wanting to arouse their interest. There are many phylum that we can go into, and that book really lays out some of the different phylum. But for us in Kingdom Animalia, the material that's on EAA archives, we have two different paths we can take. So we've got Arthropoda at the very top. So we go into subphylum Chelicerata, and then class Arachnida, or and then the larger phylum Chordata. So that notochord that really kind of binds all of us together. When we have subphylum Vertebrata, and then class Amphibia, and then we have different ways that we can take that out into the orders, and then again from there into the families. So one of the things I didn't mention when I said when we went through Kingdom Vegetalia was those circles that you're making. I encourage you to make extras of the colors that you have, so that it really helps students to know that there are blank ones in there. It's really for you to take up the work. This is an ever-evolving classification system, really both Kingdom Vegetalia and Kingdom Animalia. And so you are going to find as you go through this work, and students will find, children will find this, that as they are delving into it, they're not always called the same thing. But the etymology that we offer in this presentation is still true. And so the words that we are choosing to use just really also highlight the characteristics. And so you might be tempted to try and update your material to here's what the scientists are saying now. I just would like to remind you that this is really meant to keep the classification. So that is for the students or children to discover as they do this work. And maybe they will be making their own discoveries that become part of the classification scheme that scientists will continue to use. So the format for the folders. So again, you have the name of the folder and a representative photo. And inside that same, you've got your classification circle and the text that describes those characteristics. And sorry, I backed up too far. And I wanted to just show you the difference between order and family. So you can see the family does not further subdivide, and this is where from family, you just go to genus and species. And so this is really as far as we take it. So the next, and I'm almost done. I know that we're running out of time, but so that's all I really said about Kingdom Animalia. My assumption is that once you understand how the classification scheme works from making Kingdom Vegetalia, hopefully you will be able to navigate the archives to make Kingdom Animalia. And I'm happy, if you have questions, I'm happy to be a resource if needed. So finishing considerations. So laminating cards and circles, again, as you start the lamination process, as you are kind of going through, when you laminate, you're going to have an added edge to all of your things. And so when you make your circles, you want to make sure that you leave enough space for your ability to code what this description is. So this was still from Vegetalia, but and so then when you go to make your folders, then you can make them based off of the size of your laminated cards. And so it could be that you pre-crease your folder or box before you laminate it, so it will make it easier to actually know where to fold it after it's laminated. In that top right-hand corner, I just put an example of a bone folder. If you don't know what a bone folder is, or if you don't have one, I do think that they are incredibly helpful, especially when you were trying to fold and crease lamination. It gives you a nice straight line. So when you get to these larger boxes, like your Kingdom box and maybe your division boxes or your phylum boxes, unless you have a fairly significant commercial laminator, it is going to be really difficult for you to laminate that all in one piece. So it may be that you just cut out the main body and then you cut out the side flaps and you just attach them with, after you laminate everything, you attach it with heavy duty packing tape. That's just something that you might want to consider, and it makes it more accessible for you to maybe even do it at your school laminator instead of trying to find someone to laminate. So one of the things that I haven't done is I have not decided on what my closures will be for these. When you see it with ribbon, I will say it is incredibly beautiful and stunning. So if you were choosing to do ribbon, then again, remember that you were working from the darkest color to the lightest color. And so trying to really match that. So it's not like you're just choosing to wrap everything in white. They're sized according to the boxes that they serve, so that way the ribbons have a place, the boxes have a place, everything has its place. And if you color code it properly, then it becomes another control of error of sorts, so that students know what goes where and they can put this away independently. Again, Velcro is also an option. I always think back to my time in the primary classroom of, well, would we prefer children to wear Velcro shoes or Tide shoes? You know, I'm not going to judge. It's just something for you to consider. So that was all of my content for you today. I did want to offer a special thank you to Phyllis Potash-Lewis. She really provided a lot of the history of this material, and thank you to Nicole. Nicole did a run through with me yesterday and again today. And I have to say thank you again to the EAA board. If you are not a member of this organization yet, and speaking to you who are new to this work, it is a huge asset. It was to me when I was in the classroom. So that is the end of my presentation, and I'm here for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can I can field any questions that you might have.
Yeah, we can go ahead and open up to some live questions too. It looks like Brenda had a question about hot or cold lamination. Do you have any preference, Samantha?
I don't have a preference personally. I think that, yeah, I have no preference. I don't really know enough about it.
And if you look in the chat right now, Amanda, Kate nicely put up a link to the resources directly, and she gave you the password, which, I mean, I can't personally say enough about those, that resource. I had gone to the conference in 2015, forgotten about it, and then remembered it was there, and I was like, it was like a gift from the heavens. It was amazing. That's all my plug. And then Amanda also put in the chat, for those of you who are trainees, you guys have a complimentary membership when you finish the course. So she put some information in there as well. Yep, and it's 2015 summer conference in Sausalito that is under. Samantha, there is a question about what stories do you tell before, or do you tell stories before presenting the information?
So my understanding is that the students really have to have done a lot of those, all of the, they need to know the biology work. So this is not necessarily a starting point. This is a point where you can kind of fold together all of their other knowledge. So if you don't know how to look at a leaf or look at a flower or look at, you know, when you consider, like for dicotyledons, we're talking about their stems, we're talking about their roots, we're talking about their leaves. And so if you haven't done those things, then this becomes much harder. And so I don't know that there's a particular story. I usually do that book, you know, the Tree of Life, the biodiversity. Like I would typically do that in an orientation period, just to kind of get students thinking a little bit when they were coming from lower elementary, because they've typically done quite a bit of that biology work or botany work. And so it's just something that I would do.
Well, I believe on the archive as well, Phyllis has written some invertebrate stories that I use in my class quite a bit. They're really fun. They're also up there to download. And if you're inspired by them, you can always write kind of your own.
So Brian, I will probably send this PowerPoint to Nicole this week. So,
all of our videos will be on our YouTube channel, which we are putting together. And this will be, so if you're getting down to the nitty gritty and you're like, oh no, I don't remember what Samantha said, you can watch the video again.
Well, I hope that, you know, you will take, you know, some time to really work on this, and you can work on it together. I think that we had a workshop here in Atlanta for making this material, and 4 of us that just kind of powerhoused through a chunk of this, and we were able to finish it, the majority of it, in like a Saturday and a little bit, well, Saturday took a little extra time because we had to organize once we figured it out. But then, you know, you can do it maybe even if you have good cutting, because my hands get really cutting, but you can probably, depending on how many people there are to divide the work out, you can probably finish it fairly quickly. I'm hesitant to put a time frame on it. But it is a divide and conquer work, because if you have someone who is just making circles, then they can become pretty proficient with making circles, and they can do that. And if you have someone who is just cutting out, you know, the card, become fairly proficient in doing that. And you know, you can just work through that way.
All right. Well, are there any final questions for Samantha? No?
Mandy, is your hand up, or did you have a question?
There is a question for what kind of oriented follow-up would you?
So I will say, once they understand the classification, I would encourage students to make their own. And so fungi is a really easy one to kind of dive into. It is a manageable classification system to some degree. And students, if you go to Montessori Guide, there's a video of students starting to make a classification system, which is pretty inspiring. So that's one that I would suggest. Mandy, can we hear you now? I can't hear you. You can always type it in the chat if that's helpful. And then I'm happy to answer any question.
We'll probably be posting the links to last week's talk and Samantha's talk on Friday, AAA talk.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, so much, Samantha, for walking us through putting the folders together. This was super helpful. Remember, all of those resources and more are available to you on our website. But thank you so much. This was awesome.